to be sitting in this room with you. We're at home at the moment. You've got your two dogs around you. Now, I've been doing some work with you over the last couple of months and I've found it really fascinating, but I'm also really interested in finding about you. Can you tell me a little bit more about your childhood?
Well, I come from just a working class background. I've got a brother and a sister. I'm the middle one out of the three of us. Whether that was why I was so quiet, I don't know. My sister I always seemed to think that she was a lot more outspoken than me, and my brother was kind of the opposite. So I was more the one that kept quiet a lot. I was very shy as a child. In some respects, painfully shy. I didn't like to talk to people when I was younger. I always remember being out in the street with my mum, and if somebody would, have a conversation with her, I wouldn't say anything. I wouldn't speak. But then we were always brought up to not interrupt. You see, when people are talking, it were rude to speak, and that's no disrespect to my mum, because she did a really good job of bringing us up. And I love her to bits. But I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself.
But in terms of your intuition, when did you start sensing that?
Well,
because your mum was psychic, wasn't she?
Yeah, my mum's a medium. Yeah, it wasn't something that we talked about a lot when I was younger, but probably because my dad doesn't really believe in it, so my mum never really had a lot of support in that respect. I can't ever recall a moment where I would say I had a spiritual awakening. I don't think I understood what it was anyway, because it wasn't something that we talked about a lot, as we were younger. It was only as I got older, I always had this, I don't know what to call it, this feeling inside of me that there was more to life than, I always used to question, like, why am I me? Why am I in this situation? Why am I with this family? Why wasn't I that person? Or it was always these questions and questions. And it was only really as an adult and going further into spiritual development and understanding it more that I realised some of the things that happened to me when I was younger was all part of that, but I just assumed that everybody had it, that it was normal, because we didn't sort of talk a lot about it.
Because did your siblings have?
My brother, he actually does sense and hear spirit, and my sister, she has got some of that gift, but I don't think she's as confident with it. She's a bit more afraid. But it's kind of like, in each of us, it seems as if it's come out differently. Because I always see mine as more of like inspirational talk. It's like that channeling that goes off. And when because I channel and I write, and when I read it back, I look at it and think, but I wouldn't use words like that. It's like it's not coming from me. But there were certain things that happened when I was young that I realise now was part of that, because of doing spiritual development and talking about it and finding out that other people you had those feelings and experiences. One of them was that I saw faces. I would see faces in curtains. I would see faces in different things. If I closed my eyes, I never saw sort of dark. It was always lots of different speckles, but if I focused on one, a face would appear.
Right.
And I just assumed that it was like that for everybody, that you don't close your eyes and see complete blackness. You see more than that. And obviously as I've got older, it became colours, that there's like these pulsating colours that come backwards and forwards in my mind, and it's as if I'm trying to look beyond it. I'm expecting this to be something beyond it. So in my younger years, I questioned a lot of things, you know. It's like, you know, well, am I making it up in my head? I had a very strong sense of being able to smell energy, you know, different perfumes, tobaccos and all sorts of different things. And that was one of my dominant clairs, so to speak.
Because there's about 6, isn't there?
Yes, it's all, each one is connected with your senses, yeah. And that was my dominant one at the time. Although I used to see shadows, you know, out of my peripheral vision, and when I turned, they'd gone. And I always had this sense that there was somebody behind me. But when I was kind of like, probably in 18, 19, 20, you know, around that age, my ex-husband used to work shifts a lot. And so I used to spend nights on my own. And so when I was going up to bed, I always had this feeling there was somebody behind me, and I used to run upstairs like a bullet. I didn't turn round, you know, in case I saw something. And then sort of things just progressed from there, because I was always interested in psychic things, and I used to go to a lot of psychic fairs, you know. I would have readings and things like that, and through my hairdressing work, I just happened to get into conversations with various people that used to come, which opened conversations up about this stuff. And it's like some of these people have been doing their hair for years and never knew that they were interested in it, because it was something that's like, oh, if I tell people that things happen to me, you know, and I can sense things, then they might think I'm a bit strange. So I didn't talk about it. And then there was a particular time where I'd been to a mind, body and spirit event with my ex-husband, and I'd had a reading, and he waited for me because he got the car. And when I turned round, he were having a reading with this other lady, and I were really peeved when I got home because my recording had that much interference on it. I couldn't hear anything of what she was saying, and he got a really clear one. And I was like, but it weren't into it, it were me, you know.
Well, it's a bit like here, isn't it? Because we've got the dog snoring here.
Yeah. She
So if anyone's listening,
she loves to be part of it.
If you can hear snoring in the background, it's actually the dog. But it's one of the things that, you know, as an intuitive, having animals around you, because there is a very big thing about animals being intuitive. And in a way, you know, as humans, we have abilities, but we kind of almost desensitized a bit to it.
I think in a lot of respects, for some people, that's just a fear, you know, and I can't say that I didn't have a fear, because with respect to seeing things, then I would have been fearful, but I'd got this drive in me to want to understand it more. You know, I was constantly questioning things. I wanted proof, and I actually got my proof, because what basically happened was, years and years ago, after I'd been to this event, one of my customers, I was talking to her about it, and she actually was a healer, which I didn't know. And we got into a conversation, and it ended up where she was actually connected with my mum in her childhood. Unbeknownst to them, they'd been to the same dancing school. Wow. So these like synchronicities happening, and I introduced her then to my mum, and they're to this day they are really, really close friends. And so we used to sit once a month and have like a mini circle, and we used to, you know, just allow spirit to come through and to talk. And we've had some absolute laughs with them, because they don't like things to be serious. They like you to be a bit funny with them. And my ex-husband had a guide who was, well, let's say he just reminded me of a musketeer. That's the way that he dressed, but he liked the ladies. So he was always wanting to come in, because there was only ladies there, you know, so we were getting a lot of attention. And he used to have a certain way that he spoke, and I was always the one that had to crack jokes about everything. So I used to mimic him
Sure.
And then he'd start laughing and waving his hand about, oh, you ladies, oh, like this. And we just had an absolute blast, It was just really funny. We enjoyed it. It just kind of went on from there. And then I got introduced to my guide. And because I'm one that always likes to question things, I need proof. And, I kept asking for proof. So then I used to go into meditations and I would get this information and I wrote it all down. And she pretty much gave me her full name. She gave me the date. She gave me the name of the road where she lived. She gave me the name of her husband.
And this is your guide?
That was my first guide, yeah. And we were going to go to the Hall of Records where she lived because I wanted to prove that all of this information that I were getting wasn't just me making it up in my head.
Because let's clarify, a guide can be someone who's on this earth, who has passed over, or it could be an archangel or a higher being.
Well, you do have more than one.
Yeah.
You tend to have one that comes with you, like your guardian angel comes with you when you're born, and they're there all through your life and when you pass over. Your first guide obviously is the same. They come with you to get you through a certain period in your life and whatever those lessons are for your expansion. And then you'll have other guides come in at certain times, to take you on to that next level. But your other guide never leaves you. They don't just work solely with you. They can be working with many people, at any given time. But there'll be parts of your life where they might come back forward. So obviously my guide, whose name is Jacqueline, she has been in and out of my life, so to speak. But how I interpret it is she's never not there. She's just stood back more, and someone else might be doing whatever they've got to do to help me to move forward. But she sees me as her little girl, so she's always like kind of there, like when I need her most. If I'm saying, well, I can't smell you, or I'm not aware that you're there, then I'll get this perfume suddenly wafts across my face. It's like, oh, right, okay, so you're still here. But what happened was we had quite a few sittings and she used to come through and she gave me all this information. I never got to go to the place where she were born because my marriage broke down, and obviously, that just didn't happen. But she guided both me and my mum to go to a library in Rotherham where there was an industrial section, and she told us to find a particular book in this section and there would be a reference to her husband.
Wow.
Now, her husband had a very unusual name and I'd never heard it before. Strangely, after that, you hear people calling the new babies that name, but, before that's like, oh my gosh. And so we went and we found this book, and I was flicking through this book, and there in this book was a reference to her husband and the work that he'd done as a businessman. So it was like, when you get that fluttering of excitement, because you're thinking, oh my gosh, I am not making this stuff
and it's
up.
not pushing away, it's pushing away all doubt, isn't it?
Yes, it was just I needed proof at that time, because you do, and I would argue with any medium or anybody that uses those abilities, there will be a certain point when you're going into it where you question yourself and think, am I creating this in my head? Am I making these stories up or whatever? So it's about trust, and trust only comes in time as you build up that rapport with them, So it was what I needed at that time to prove that I wasn't the one that was making this information up. It was coming through.
You've spoken about your mum. When did you start opening up with your mum all about this journey that this intuitive journey that you were on?
Do you know, I can't remember. I honestly can't remember. I think it just was something that naturally flowed in. And I think because me and my mum are kind of really close in respect, that I'm the one that's gone down this avenue more so, and obviously because of my work now, it's kind of heading that way. And I think it was just, I felt it were really nice for my mum to now be able to have somebody that she can talk about things, you know, we can have these conversations. And when you're in a family background where, you know, you've got a husband that don't want to talk about it because he don't believe in it, then it's quite isolating, because you've got things happening to you that you can't share with anybody. So now, you know, we can talk about these things, and we can question things. And, you know, if she gets any messages or anything, you just say, oh, you know, I've just sat watching television and somebody's just popped in and they've said this and you know, and it's like, wow, that's really interesting. And she's very, very supportive of what I do. My mum's quite shy, you know. And she's
like mother, like daughter. Then,
yeah,
isn't
well,
it?
you know, and that's the funny thing, because after going into hypnotherapy and learning about that, then I understood that actually I'm not shy.
Yeah.
It's just a program.
Sure.
And obviously my mum's running the same program because of her background. And so and I've got a dad who's actually very similar as well, so it kind of sort of runs that pattern. But I've broken that cycle because I've grown out of that, so to speak, because of all the things that I've done, the experiences and that I've had to go through in my life.
Now, you've adopted a couple of kids.
Yeah.
And it's had quite an impact on your life. Can you share that with listeners?
Yes, well, I was I was always a person, because I got married quite young. I was 18 when I got married, and I kind of had this fear of having children, not in respect of looking after him. That's not an issue. It was actually having him, and it's like, oh no, I can't go through that. And then my brother, him and his partner, had a child, and I went to see him in hospital, and it was like this overwhelming feeling came over me of mothering. It's like, you know, I really want a family. And we decided obviously to try and have children. Ended up at hospital, had lots of tests and everything, was told to go away and keep trying. Just never happened. And so we decided to go down the adoption route, and we adopted my daughter first. And she was with us for 7 years before we adopted my son. But it was the same thing, you know, that happened again. It's like, no, I want to be a mother again. And so we adopted my son as well. So it was a long process and a lot of learning. And I think people don't really take into consideration just how much hard work it is. Not just the, you know, having the children, but the process that you have to go through, the interrogations, you know, the questions, all of the hoops you have to jump through, and the training that you have to do to be a parent, you know, before you even get to adopt. And there's been times when we thought we were never going to get there, and then all of a sudden, you know, we get this opportunity to adopt a little girl, and it's just God-given, you know. It's just an amazing experience, and I would tell anybody, you know, if you really want children and you're struggling to have children, then just look down that route as well, because these children, they need people to love them. And I never ever in all of my years of looking after my kids saw them as anything other than they are my children. And particularly my daughter, when she first arrived, people thought she was mine because of the physical facial resemblances. You know, it was like, wow. So I used to say that saying, you know, that she's a child from another mother, but she was actually my child.
Yeah.
She should have been my child. When we're looking at spiritual, that's how I see it.
Because I was going to actually expand on this. Do you think it is part of your spiritual journey that you were meant to adopt these children, and that did, in a sense, advance you further down the spiritual path?
I think it did, yeah. I mean, it did in a lot of ways as well, because obviously trying to overcome this shyness, and, you know, when I first started work, going into the kind of work that I was doing, because I went into hairdressing, meant I had to come out of my shell. But I didn't wholly do that. It was when I got my children that I suddenly realised that I've suddenly got to be this grown up. You know, I've got to be more confident, because now I've got somebody who is solely relying on me. So I could do anything for these children. I didn't have an issue going and getting them an appointment at doctors if need be, or taking them wherever. I had to overcome a lot of my confidence issues, because I had to be the person for them, so to speak. And, you know, looking back now, you know, when you're going through this infertility thing, and it's an awful thing to have to go through, because you go through a lot of emotional trauma, and there's other things that happened as well, you know, after Tabitha, where I was offered IVF on the NHS, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to get an opportunity to be a mum, and I did all of the
and Tabitha's your first daughter.
Tabitha was my first daughter, yeah. And I did all the tests and everything. I started having the bloods done, ready to have the treatment. And then I was sent a letter saying I wasn't entitled to it, because in the eyes of the law, I'd got a child, even though I'd never had any treatment before. So they refused me, and we appealed. But that emotional roller coaster was just, it was so intense, and the depression, you know, and the hurt and the anger and everything. And at the same time, you're trying to look after this child. And then obviously years went on, and we decided to adopt again. And it's that, you know, my life has been so colourful. That's how I see it now. It's colourful, you know, not like, oh, it's full of trauma. I understand it was traumatic. But when you're at the other side of it, and you're this person that you are now, you look at all these things and you think, yes, but if I hadn't have gone through that, I wouldn't be the person that I am now. If I hadn't experienced that, I wouldn't be doing the work that I do now, because, you know, all of the different things that's happened in infertility, you know, I've had IVF in later life with my second husband, because obviously when there were no reasons why I couldn't conceive a child. So we went through that process, and we did have IVF. Unfortunately, I lost it, and that was another trauma after doing the adoptions, but also looking at the other side of it and how these children would feel that I'd already adopted had I had my own child. You know, because they come with these traumas of their own, of identification, and who are they, and, you know, what is their background, what is their life, and then seeing someone wanting to introduce somebody who will be biologically part of them, then makes them feel, are they not going to love us the same? Are they not going to see us the same? And I realised, you know, that perhaps sometimes things happen for a reason, because I would never have wanted these children to feel like they didn't belong. You know, that the love I had for those children equates to having any of my own children. You know, and I get emotional about it, because it really does feel that much for me. I remember when, you know, I went to meet my daughter for the first time in the foster home, and that feeling when I had to walk out and leave her, I couldn't stop crying, because I just wanted to bring her home, and I had to wait because there was so much paperwork to go through, and the introductions and having to take her out, getting her to know you. And then we had issues with the foster family, because the foster mum didn't want to give her up, so she started refusing to let her go when we you know, went to pick her up. She'd be holding her, so Tabitha would get upset about it, and clingy, and it's like this trauma, you're being put through this trauma as well as this child's been put through this trauma, and then you've got to pick up all these pieces and make this child, understand that you love them. And the day that she came to live with us, I was actually working that day, and I was working late because it got so difficult that the adoptions decided that they had to move her quickly, and I couldn't get the time off work. So my mum and my ex-husband had to go and pick her up, and I worked from home at the time, and I could see this child that was so traumatised cuddling up to my mum, because she were lost.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get to her.
Yeah.
Because I'd got to finish this lady's hair before I could get out, to go and say, I'm here for you.
I'm your mum.
Yeah, I'm your mum. And that feeling that the first time they ever call you mum, it's like, oh my gosh. It's just, I can't begin to explain to you how it feels.
Sometimes when I see healers or therapists, you sometimes have this view that they are perfect, that they've not really been through that many challenges, or if they have, it's all clear now.
Yeah.
But that's not reality, isn't it?
No. In the field of work that I'm in and the people that I know, I've not yet come across one person that hasn't been through some kind of trauma. And I think that for a lot of people, it's the trauma that triggers this intuitive side of you. It's, and it can be any form. It could be that you've been through a serious illness, and that's triggered something in you. Or it could be, just as it has been for me. As I said before, I wouldn't say that it was like a mass awakening that happened. It was just something that was there. But then my life, how it panned out, it's been peaks and troughs, peaks and troughs, peaks and troughs. And I mean, I always like to talk about, the day I was born and the story that my mum told me, because obviously in those days most people were born at home. And when I was delivered, I wasn't breathing. I'd got the cord wrapped around my neck, and for all intents and purposes, I was believed to be dead.
Right.
And the doctor did absolutely everything to try and get me to breathe, and I wouldn't breathe. And at this very same time as this was happening, I was born at 7:00 in the morning. There was an announcement on the radio. My mum was saying that President Kennedy had been shot and killed. So I always remember 22nd of November 1963. That's the day of my birthday, and
Right.
that was the significant thing that happened. And at that moment, the doctor said to my mum, I'm going to do something very drastic. Have I got permission to do it? And obviously my mum, she must have been in trauma.
Sure.
Do whatever you need to do. And he threw me in the air and hit me back on the ceiling.
Wow.
And I coughed and I started breathing. Now, this day and age, I mean, obviously that doctor's passed away a long time ago, but this day and age, if that were done, it would be a whole different story.
Yes. Wow.
But that doctor saved my life, and I often say now, if I'd have known the life that I was going to have and the experiences that I was going to have, maybe I had an inclination, and maybe I was saying, actually, I've changed my mind. I don't
Pass
want
this one.
Yeah,
Pass this lifetime.
I don't want to come. I've changed my mind. But there's a lot of things that's happened in my life, and a lot of traumas, as well as good things, happy things as well. But I just see all these things now as just part of my journey. And, I've been through 2 divorces. Had I still been in a marriage now, I wouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be doing so much of the psychic stuff that I'm doing. So obviously that was, whatever the experience was that I needed to gain from that marriage, it was as far as it could take me.
We have a tendency to say, it's either bad or good.
Yeah.
Well, it's not necessarily that case, is it? It's more about, I need this experience, whether consciously or subconsciously,
Yeah.
so that I can progress and go and do this instead.
Yeah. On a soul level.
Yeah.
It was traumatic. I can't say it wasn't. And it did affect me emotionally. In both cases, both different reasons why they happened. But equally, I went through a trauma. I lost a lot of weight. I lost a lot of my confidence. But throughout that, I grew. And sometimes you end up feeling like you're going down before you come up. So I can look at that now and say, but thank you. Because if I hadn't have had those experiences, I would not be the person that I am today. And I'm just a work in progress. I don't see myself as healed, and I doubt very much if I'll ever be healed, if you want to call it healing. I don't want to see it in that respect. I want to see it as growth. I have a mind that I remember thinking, when in my first marriage, when I was just a hairdresser, that I was a lesser person because my ex-husband, in my eyes, I believed had a better job than me. But that was actually about me, not about him, because that was about me and my confidence and my self-worth and my shyness that made me feel that way. And then as, things went off in that relationship, that I then felt I had to become the stronger one of the two. So he was teaching me as much as I was teaching him, but it took me a lot longer to get over the hurt and the bitterness and the anger. I had to work through that process. With the second time round, that didn't happen. Because I understood, yes, I was hurt, but I understood that, we're all just doing the best that we can. So, and you can't spend your life holding grudges against people or feeling hurt or anger, because it just kills you, it just hurts you. You've got to be able to be adult enough and mature enough to say thank you. You don't have to directly say it to them, but if you're verbalising it to yourself and you're setting yourself free from that, to be able to carry on and move forward. And as an independent person, I've had to learn about recognising that I was always independent. I just didn't see it that way. And the fear was, can I survive on my own? Can I do this on my own? And then I realised I am doing it on my own and I am surviving. Actually, no, I'm not surviving. I'm thriving.
Yeah.
And that's why I always say these things, when I'm doing my posts and things, I will say, you are not a survivor. You're not here to survive. You're here to thrive. And you thrive through all of those experiences that you are exposed to in your life, good or bad. When we get out of ego, we can see it that way. When ego's trying to play its part and keep you held in that space, it'll tell you 100 reasons why you should be bitter or you should be angry or it's their fault or it's, whatever.
Yeah.
But when you get out of that and you say, yeah, but what part did I play in that? It's not to judge somebody. It's not to say you're to blame or you're to blame. It's to say, how, what have I learned from that about me? How did I respond? Could I have done something differently? And if I couldn't, then accept that you did the best that you could with what you knew. And you move on. You move on from it. Life is a learning experience. That's why we're here, to experience these things, to recognise who we are within it,
yeah.
and to learn our lessons from it and to grow from it.
Just about your work then, because you've got this amazing array of different types of work. Can you just explain a little bit about that?
Yes, well, obviously I started out as a hairdresser from 16 years old. I used to work at John Lewis, and then I started at 18 I started my own hairdressing business. But I always had this thirst for learning, more things. So I was taking myself back to college. I learned something else, and then I'd say, oh, I don't want to do any more of that now. I just want to carry on with my job. And it's like, no, it's not enough. It's like I've always got itchy feet, and I want to learn more. I want to understand more about life. And it kind of sent me on this journey of doing all these different courses. And some of it as well was more about me feeling like I had to prove myself. But then doing all of these different courses and things kind of opened my mind up to more things. But it was always about the energy of stuff, the energetic side of this, how the mind works and all that kind of thing. And obviously my spiritual things that came into it. So, I'm qualified in crystal therapy, Reiki, energy healing. Even, I did Reiki for animals and animal psychology. Anything that I chose that I wanted to do. Years ago, I used to run a holiday boarding business for small animals. But I felt I needed to show that I was qualified to do that. So I took a course on animal psychology, and kind of I integrated that. And, I've done NLP coaching, lots and lots of different things in different, not all to do with spiritual stuff. Some of it has been in different avenues. What I didn't realise was that all of those things were going to bring me to this point of what I do now. At the time, I just thought I was learning something because, maybe I could make a business out of that. Maybe I could, but that never happened. And then as the years went by, I started, actually it was through the hairdressing place that I went to, and one of the ladies that worked there started talking to me about crystals and energy and things, and I started, discussing things with her. And then I went in one day, and another lady that were there were going through a really rough time, and this lady said to me, I've been telling her what you said about crystals, and could you have a word with her, because she's really struggling. So we went outside and we had a chat, and she asked if she could come and see me. So I had a conversation with her. She ended up becoming a very, very dear friend, and that kind of led to people then saying, would you do a group, and chat about everything? So I was like, okay, I'll do that,
Yeah.
There's these roads that you get pushed down that you never know you're going to go down. And so my mum came, and I did this talk, and that was when I did a channeling. And I was given a metaphor of how energy works, and I wrote it down, and I delivered it in that evening. And then we did a few card readings, and then they kept, the people that come saying, are you going to run any classes, so it were like snowballing. So then I started running a meditation class, a spiritual development class, but with it's a different type of spiritual development, because a lot of the things that I do after doing some spiritual development myself and training with other people, I started to create my own class, teaching about ascended masters and archangels and angels, teaching about the 15 chakra system, the levels of energy, the hierarchy, all of this thing, and found myself like a magnet being drawn to all of this scientific stuff, and quantum physics. But I need to know how it works. I need to know what it is. And I'm not just happy knowing that the spirit or, your soul and things like that. It's like, I've got to know the scientific side of it. I've got to marry it together, and I've got to understand it. And I found myself delivering these conversations to these girls that I thought were quite simple. It's like, oh yeah, I've watched this, series on it, and it's like, oh, I'm having these light bulb moments. But I knew that, and I knew that writing it down. And then they're sat there completely blank going, gosh, that's the way above my head. I was like, well, how do I put this into layman's terms? So that was sort of, the way it were developing. And then the friend of mine, she kept saying to me, oh, I don't know why you don't, have a look at hypnotherapy, because a lot of these meditations you're doing are like her brother was a hypnotherapist. And it's exactly what he's doing, that I think you'd love it. And it's like, well, I don't know, questioning it. And then she actually tagged me on Facebook in an advert. And I don't know what happened. I think my finger got carried away that day and just pressed the button for, make an inquiry. And then the next day I got this phone call from the tutor, and he asked me a few questions about myself and everything. And he said, I'd like to offer you a place. And when you've got no control over your mouth, because your head's telling you something else, but your mouth says something different. I went, okay. It's like, oh my gosh, what have I just let myself in for? So a couple of months later, there was a free weekend to go on. I did go to that weekend, and my dad, bear in mind, I was in my 40s, no, 50s. I was in my 50s when this happened, and my dad took me into town to drop me off so that I didn't have to park my car anywhere. And I burst into tears on the way there, and my dad's really broad, and he said, what they're crying for? And I went, well, because I won't know anybody. It was that little Karen, that version of Karen that were coming back saying, oh, you can't do that, you can't step out your comfort zone, and you're going to feel really, and then people are going to look at you and and all that. And he just said to me, well, everybody else will be feeling the same, won't they? And I thought, well, he's right, really,
Very wise.
Yes. Went in, started talking to some people. It was the best decision I've ever made in my life.
So Karen, what inspires you?
Every time I work with somebody doing my Awesome New You programme and being gifted the opportunity to work with someone over a period of weeks and helping them to transform, and seeing it, seeing them from when they first come in and what their issues are, what they want help with, to the last session when they've had this. It's like part way through that program, they suddenly have this massive epiphany, and they suddenly know where they're heading and what they want to do, and they get excited, and it's like, that inspires me to carry on. There's always a moment where you're thinking, am I on right track? And then all of a sudden you get this epiphany happens. It's like they just switched on.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, oh my gosh, it's amazing. And I feel so grateful and so humble to be able to be a part of that journey, a part of that process. Because what I see in those people is where I was.
Karen, thank you so much for speaking to me today. Wonderful conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.